A good woman's silence. In the heart of southern Nigeria, where tradition holds tightly to the bones of expectation, lived a woman named Chioma, strong, intelligent, devout, and full of dreams. She had always believed that marriage was a crown of honor, the ultimate symbol of success. What she didn't know was that the journey would strip her of everything she once held sacred. Her story, now told in whispers among women who know what it means to suffer in silence, began not with love, but with longing. A longing for companionship, stability, and a life she thought only a husband could give. The first illusion. Chioma met Emeka at a birthday party hosted by a mutual friend, Amara. He was warm, articulate, polished, a man whose charm masked deep shadows. He was everything a well-trained manipulator should be. Attentive, confident, deeply spiritual. Within weeks, he proposed. He said God had shown him Chioma in a dream that she was his wife. It sounded romantic, even divine. But it was the first trick in a carefully crafted illusion. She accepted, believing this man was the answer to her prayers. But the truth came quietly at first. An address that didn't add up. Emeka, who claimed to be based in Abuja, was actually living in Owerri. Just a small misunderstanding, he said. Chioma dismissed the unease in her belly. After all, people made mistakes. Soon came more lies. His job, his finances, even the family stories he shared unraveled under scrutiny. But Chioma held fast to hope. She told herself love was about endurance, that prayer would perfect what was lacking, that marriage required sacrifice, and she was willing to pay. When she was promoted to a managerial role in Owerri, Emeka's city, it felt like divine alignment. She took it as confirmation that her relationship was on the right path. And despite the deepening cracks, she pushed forward. But her first visit to Emeka's world was jarring. He had no home of his own. He lived in a squalor, squatting with a friend. She slept on a bare foam mattress in a dirty room. Still, she said nothing. She didn't complain. She believed in him. When the issue of housing came up, Emeka couldn't afford to rent a place. Chioma stepped in. She used her own savings to secure a 2-bedroom apartment. She bought the furniture, she made it a home. What she didn't know was that while she built his home, he entertained other women within his walls. Soon after settling, Emeka pressed hard for marriage. He wanted it fast, too fast. By September, he had fixed a date for December. Chioma asked him to slow down, but he wouldn't listen. Eventually, they agreed to meet their families. That's when things began to crumble. A simple visit to her mother's house unearthed a long-forgotten memory. Chioma had once acted in a student TV series. Her cousin mentioned it in passing. Emeka's response was rage. "You didn't tell me this. What else are you hiding?" That night, back at his hotel, he accused her of deception. He said he no longer trusted her. Over a harmless student production from years ago, he threatened to call off the marriage. It wasn't the first time he doubted her. Earlier, she had confessed to adjusting her age by 2 years on Facebook, common among women her age. But for Emeka, it was betrayal. He used her honesty against her. Still, she held on. Spiritual manipulation and sickness. After that trip, his behavior worsened. He grew cold, unpredictable, emotionally volatile. And then Chioma began falling mysteriously ill. Dizziness, weakness, unexplained fatigue. When a nurse mistakenly administered an undiluted injection at a hospital in Owerri, Chioma nearly died. The hospital called Emeka in panic. His response: "She's pretending." Even in the face of near death, he showed no compassion. Still, she stayed. He twisted the scripture, used her faith as a leash. He told her spiritual forces were fighting their union, that they had to marry fast before the devil succeeded in breaking them up. And she, a woman of deep faith, believed him. As the wedding plans continued, so did the lies. Text messages from other women lit up his phone when she was near. Neighbors whispered. Visitors came, and yet, Chioma looked the other way. Her silence became her survival. When his father insisted on a formal introduction before the wedding, Emeka agreed as against his agreement with Chioma. She didn't want any introduction prior to the traditional marriage. Then, just 6 days before the planned ceremony, he called her. "Let me just pay your bride price, Pius," he said. "If we do the introduction, the wedding may not hold. You know the forces fighting against this marriage." Angry, hurt, and confused, Chioma wanted to cancel, but her siblings begged her to hold on. She had come so far. And so, with haste, the traditional wedding was arranged in 6 days. She sent clothes to her sister. The celebration happened, small, rushed, but done. But underneath the music and dancing was a woman unsure of what she was doing, but she gave up her voice, her peace, her truth. She was a woman who learned too late that silence is not strength when it protects your oppressor. That marriage is not a reward for suffering. That love should never cost you your sanity. On the morning of their traditional marriage, Chioma and Emeka sat quietly in church for their introduction. The pews felt colder than usual, not from the weather, but from the tension that hung between them. Chioma had still not met Emeka's mother, an absence that had long raised questions in her mind. Their strained relationship had kept mother and daughter-in-law apart, and today it cast a shadow over what should have been a joyful day. As they sat through the service, Chioma's skirt unknowingly shifted, exposing part of her waistline. It wasn't intentional or something she did deliberately to show her waist, but Emeka's reaction was far from mild. He turned red with rage, nearly walking out of the church in the middle of the service. Chioma, humiliated and confused, pleaded with him to stay. That moment struck her like a quiet alarm, a red flag flapping in the wind, but she buried it. After all, it was their special day. She told herself love was about patience. After the service, the pastor, unaware of the undercurrents, asked if Chioma had met Emeka's mother. When she shook her head, the pastor suggested they visit her before the afternoon ceremony. Emeka's reluctance was palpable. He dismissed the suggestion with a shrug that unsettled Chioma further. Still, she pressed on, eyes fixed on the ceremony ahead. Not long before the wedding date, Emeka received a job promotion to Port Harcourt as a full staff. Chioma had taken it as a sign of God's favor, she believed. It reassured her that their union was divinely endorsed. But the traditional wedding day itself unfolded like a bad omen. During the dance, Chioma excused herself briefly to speak with her stylist, who had to leave. By the time she returned, Emeka had left the dance floor, his face tight with anger. He later exploded over everything from the food arrangement to how Chioma's sister had failed to cater to him properly. He made a public scene, and Chioma once again tried to hold things together, convinced it was just stress and temporary tension. As preparations for the white wedding began, Chioma looked forward to following through on their initial plans. But Emeka dropped a bombshell. He didn't think the church wedding was necessary. He argued that since the bride price had been paid, the rites were complete. What more did they need? Chioma was heartbroken. They argued, threats of a breakup looming between heated words. Eventually, a new date was agreed upon. Another obstacle soon emerged. They needed a marriage certificate from the registry. Emeka refused, insisting that the church certificate was enough. It took the combined efforts of Chioma's family and their pastor to convince him otherwise. Even then, he went grudgingly. When the certificate was ready, he snatched it from Chioma in front of her family, an act that spoke louder than words. Something inside her shifted. The power balance was tilting, and not in her favor. After the traditional rites, Emeka relocated to Port Harcourt, staying with Chioma's friend while they searched for their own apartment. During this time, Chioma had purchased Asubi fabrics for her colleagues without informing him. To her, it was a gesture of inclusion. To Emeka, it was an act of disrespect. He exploded again, accusing her of making decisions without his input. That night, he packed up and left, staying with his friend. The emotional distance widened. Their white wedding day was nothing short of chaotic. A torrential downpour delayed everything. By the time they arrived at the venue, hours had passed. The reception was a haze of exhaustion and strained smiles, but the night ended in horror. In their hotel room, an argument over moving coolers spiraled out of control. Emeka slapped Chioma on her wedding night. Her heart shattered, but her resolve remained. She convinced herself it was just the devil testing them. Marriage, she believed, came with trials. She would pray. She would endure. Moving in together in Port Harcourt only intensified the problems. Emeka's temper flared more frequently, and his hands turned violent. During a visit to the market, Chioma filled out a receipt using both their names. Emeka saw it as a challenge to his authority. He tore the receipt in public, yelled at her, and struck her. It was the second slap in just 1 week of marriage. Then came the news. Chioma was pregnant. For a brief moment, she hoped it would change him. She thought the idea of fatherhood would soften his anger. But it only seemed to fuel it. After a disagreement, he slapped her again and kicked her in the stomach. Chioma, dazed and crumpled in pain, held her belly and wept, not just for herself but for the child within her. Despite the worsening abuse, Chioma kept up appearances. Every weekend she traveled back and forth between Port Harcourt and her station in Owerri just to please Emeka. Her work suffered, her spirit dimmed. Her younger brother visited one weekend and noticed the change in her eyes, the silence that screamed. But when he asked, she brushed it off as a misunderstanding. Eventually, her sister uncovered the truth and called Emeka directly. But instead of remorse, he doubled down. That very night, while Chioma was 6 months pregnant, Emeka beat her again. And in that moment, something broke inside her. It wasn't just her body, it was her hope. Chioma sat in silence, holding a swollen belly, staring into a future that looked nothing like the dreams she once had. Her heart was a battlefield of faith and fear, love and loss, hope and haunting memories. The night Emeka woke Chioma from her sleep just to beat her again was the night the harsh reality struck her. This man had no regard for her nor for her family. The provocation? Chioma's sister had pleaded with him not to upset her during her pregnancy. That simple plea triggered a storm. Chioma had always known Emeka wasn't one to respect people, not his parents, not pastors, not even mentors, but that night revealed something deeper. When Emeka's own father confronted him, warning him that if anything happened to Chioma or the baby, he would be held responsible, Emeka replied coldly, "I know where to hit her so it won't affect the pregnancy." Broken and bruised, Chioma returned to her workstation, carrying her heart weighed down with sorrow, pain, and silent tears. She told no one. Only God heard her cries. Soon after, the accusations began. "You've abandoned your home," Emeka would say. It became a chorus, a constant reminder that she wasn't present enough. Chioma was working in another city, but she did her best. Every weekend, she traveled down to Port Harcourt, heavily pregnant, to cook and clean. She'd prepare meals and stock the freezer, but Emeka wouldn't touch the food. He wouldn't boil rice. He wouldn't make iba, nothing. He waited for her return. And yet, even after her exhausting trips, he wouldn't let her go back to work on Sunday evenings. One weekend, she fell ill and couldn't travel. She informed him. Instead of concern, he showered her with curses and accusations, claiming she faked her illness just to avoid coming. Her sacrifices were endless. Every Friday, she left work an hour early to catch her bus. She often arrived home at 10 p.m., sometimes as late as midnight, navigating treacherous traffic. Her transportation was self-funded. Not once did Emeka contribute. When she complained, he dismissed her. That's your cross for working far from home. Even though he knew about her transfer before they married, he now insisted she resign. "It's a privilege I allow you to work," he would say. "I can stop you if I want." During the later stage of her pregnancy, complications arose. Chioma's legs were severely swollen and she was constantly itching. At 37 weeks, during a routine checkup, a consultant told her she had to be induced for her safety and the baby's. Devastated, she accepted it. She had hoped to give birth in Port Harcourt, but that dream was snatched away. She informed Emeka, who arrived only hours after her delivery, then promptly returned to Port Harcourt to resume work. 3 days after birth, as they were about to be discharged, Chioma noticed something disturbing. The baby was too sleepy. She voiced her concern, but none of the doctors or nurses noticed the jaundice. They were sent home. Chioma confided in her sister and landlady, who confirmed her fear. The baby had jaundice. Knowing Emeka wouldn't return to Owerri, she took a chance and brought the baby for immunization the next day. Thankfully, no one noticed the jaundice at the hospital. They chartered a car to Port Harcourt. Immediately, Chioma barely dropped her bags before rushing to a hospital. The doctor confirmed the jaundice and admitted the baby. When she informed Emeka, he exploded. Accusations flew that she had done it to punish him, that he couldn't be coming from work every day, and that he wouldn't pay for her to stay near the hospital. The next day, Chioma felt dizzy. She was diagnosed with high blood pressure, a condition that would follow her to this day. They remained in the hospital for 6 days. The naming ceremony took place there. Back home, Chioma stumbled upon a message on Emeka's phone. A woman was confronting him, shocked to hear he had a child. "You never told me she was pregnant," she wrote. "You said you were forced into that marriage and that you two don't sleep together." The betrayal tore Chioma apart. When she confronted Emeka, he sneered. "If you check my phone, whatever you see, you'll deal with." Prior to delivery, when the pressure to get a transfer mounted and he complained about cooking during the week, they had agreed on getting him help. Chioma arranged for a young boy, about 18 years old, who was learning a skill, to live with him during the weekdays. But Emeka twisted it. He accused her of bringing a lover into his house, a mere boy, branded as her boyfriend. Absurd, but damaging. Throughout her pregnancy, Emeka repeatedly questioned the paternity of the child, claiming the birth would prove the truth. When the son was born, a striking image of his father, Emeka shrugged it off. "I only said that to spite you," he admitted. Less than a month after delivery, Emeka resumed his brutal routine. Even with Chioma's sister around and her high blood pressure still uncontrolled, he didn't stop. He beat her again. During her maternity leave, Chioma fought silently for a transfer to Port Harcourt. She leaned on a connection, a family acquaintance with ties to her father-in-law, and finally, her prayers were answered. The very week she resumed work, the transfer letter came through. For the first time in a long time, Chioma felt a small ray of relief. Her troubles weren't over, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could reduce even by 50%. It didn't take long after their marriage for Emeka's insecurities to begin poisoning the air Chioma breathed. Every step she took, every call she answered, every smile she shared, even at work, became a crime in his eyes. Emeka's suspicion ran so deep it consumed him, and inevitably it began to consume her too. Chioma, in her usual warm and respectful way, related with her male colleagues with nothing more than courtesy and professionalism. But in Emeka's mind, every thank you, every harmless greeting was evidence of betrayal. If a male colleague complimented her hairstyle or commended her efforts at work, Emeka would react with unfiltered rage. Most nights, after pretending to sleep, Emeka would jolt up at midnight. With eyes wide and a heart heavy with mistrust, he would snatch Chioma's phone from under her pillow or beside her on the nightstand. He'd scroll through her messages in the dark, scanning her chats with terrifying intensity, reading even the most mundane messages like criminal evidence. If he found the word "dear" or even a "sweet dreams" from a male contact, he would wake Chioma with the back of his hand. Questions would follow, accusations laced with fury, jealousy, and a growing thirst for control. Who is he to say sweet dreams to you? Why is your smile so wide in this picture? Are you not ashamed, flaunting yourself to men while you have a husband at home? Chioma would try to explain, calmly at first, then with tears. But Emeka never heard reason. The more she tried, the more determined he became to strip her of every connection to the outside world. Her phone calls were monitored, her chats deleted, her laughter stifled. Soon, Emeka began sowing fear into her social life. Chioma was no longer allowed to visit friends or attend any function, not weddings, not birthdays, not even church fellowships without scrutiny. If she dared to dress nicely or wear makeup, he would question her motives. Who are you dressing for? Is it the men at your office? Don't you see how you're embarrassing me? Chioma found herself shrinking. At work, she began avoiding everyone, especially the male staff, to avoid further accusations at home. But even that wasn't enough. Emeka's next target was a job. He accused her of prioritizing a career over a marriage, of using work as an excuse to abandon her duties as a wife. You leave this house every morning and come back tired. Is it the work or the men? You cook late, you clean late, you can't even keep your home because you're too busy being a career woman. You're not fit to be a wife. The pressure mounted daily. What started as emotional manipulation became an ultimatum. If she truly wanted peace in her home, Emeka said she had to choose the job or the marriage. Exhausted, broken, and stripped of her voice, Chioma handed in her resignation. She gave up her income. She gave up her independence. She gave up her sanctuary, all for a man who saw love not as companionship, but as control. But deep within her, a silent prayer remained, clinging to the hope that one day, the real Emeka she thought she married would return. Little did she know, the man she once dreamed of had never existed. After enduring months of emotional torture, constant suspicion, and unbearable accusations, Chioma finally gave in. The pressure from Emeka was unrelenting. No matter how hard she tried, no matter how much she sacrificed, their home remained a battlefield. Peace was a stranger, and her once bright spirit dimmed under the weight of his control. So, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, Chioma resigned from her job. It wasn't because she wanted to, it was because she had to. For the sake of her sanity, for the sake of what was left of her home. But Chioma wasn't the kind of woman to sit idle or wallow in defeat. If she couldn't work a regular 9 to 5, then she would create something of her own. Perhaps if she stayed home more and still contributed financially, Emeka would finally find the peace he claimed she was denying him. With quiet determination, she ventured into the real estate world. She learned, she listened, and slowly, she began to find her footing. Alongside that, she established a delivery service company, something that allowed her to work flexibly and still be present at home. She poured her energy, her pain, and her hope into building something meaningful. Emeka watched her from a distance, never truly believing she could succeed. He dismissed her efforts as a phase, something she would eventually abandon. But Chioma proved him wrong. Her business began to gain attention. Calls came in, deals were made. Clients, many of them men in influential positions, recognized her intelligence and professionalism. They offered contracts, made referrals, and her income began to rise steadily. But instead of celebrating her growth, Emeka grew restless. He couldn't understand how a woman he had tried so hard to break was now standing tall, glowing with confidence and financial independence. He resented the attention she received. The success that should have made him proud only fed his jealousy. The accusations returned, sharper than ever. You're sleeping with these men to get contracts. Who exactly is this client that keeps calling? You think you're smart, hiding behind business to be a prostitute. Chioma was stunned. No explanation was ever enough. Every new client meant a new fight. Every phone call became a source of rage. The beatings resumed, sometimes worse than before. He would wait until midnight, scroll through her business messages, and accuse her of being too friendly with her clients. If a man addressed her respectfully or with admiration, it became another reason to question her integrity. What Emeka failed to understand was that Chioma's strength was not in her job or her clients, it was in her spirit. And no matter how much he tried to cage her, her light kept finding a way to shine. But at what cost? Every success she tasted came with bruises. Every milestone met was followed by a beating. And the one person who should have clapped the loudest was the one who hit the hardest. Still, Chioma pressed on because giving up was never in her nature. Amidst the chaos, amidst the constant turmoil that had become her daily life with Emeka, Chioma still held on to a quiet dream. She longed to have another child, not just for herself, but for her little boy. She wanted him to have a sibling, someone to share childhood with, someone to laugh and grow with, someone who would remain when the noise in their home eventually faded. Even though her body was battling high blood pressure and her heart carried the weight of emotional wounds, Chioma was determined to take the risk. Her gynecologist had warned her sternly, "Do not attempt another pregnancy until your BP is under control. It's dangerous." But Chioma, in her quiet strength, chose to believe that love and motherhood were worth the danger. Month after month, she tried. Hope after hope, she waited. Intimacy with Emeka had become a heavy, loveless duty. The warmth that once existed, if it ever truly did, was gone. Every touch now came with coldness. Every act felt like a sacrifice. Void of emotion, yet she laid there, time after time, not for desire, but for obligation. She had convinced herself, this is what wives do, this is what mothers do to build a home. But time was passing, and still, nothing. Eventually, Chioma voiced her concern. "Let's go for a test," she pleaded. "Let's find out why it's not happening." Emeka flared up in instant resistance. "What test? Why should I be tested? If we had one child, then we can't have another." "What sort of nonsense is this?" he barked. "I am not sterile. Our first child is enough proof." His pride was louder than her pain. For weeks, they argued, they fought, and she begged, not because she wanted to challenge him, but because she needed answers. Finally, after relentless pressure and emotional exhaustion, Emeka gave in. They went for the test together. The silence in the waiting room was thick. Chioma's hands were cold, her heart racing, but she hoped. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something minor. Maybe this will bring clarity and direction. But nothing could prepare her for what the doctor said. "Mr. Emeka," the doctor began carefully, "your test results show you have azoospermia. There's no sperm present in your semen." The room spun. Chioma felt her chest tighten. She blinked rapidly, trying to understand what she had just heard. "No sperm?" she whispered. How is that possible?" She turned to Emeka, hoping for a reaction, an explanation, something, but Emeka sat frozen, his face hardening with denial. Chioma's world cracked at that moment. Confusion poured in like a flood. Questions raged in her mind. How can this be? If he has no sperm, how did I get pregnant the first time? Is this recent? Or was it always like this? Her head pounded. Her heart ached. She had endured the accusations, the beatings, the jealousy, and the emotional bruises, all while desperately trying to carry out her role as a wife and mother. She sacrificed her peace, her career, even her health, just to give their son a sibling. But now she was faced with the devastating truth. The very man who mocked her delays, who blamed her for not conceiving again, who questioned her faithfulness, was the one who could no longer father a child. And in that moment, Chioma realized the storm she was fighting wasn't just outside of her, it was right there beside her, silent, bitter, and broken. The doctor's words were gentle, yet firm. "There are options, Mr. Emeka," he said. "With azoospermia, we can explore hormone therapy or certain medications to stimulate sperm production. If that doesn't yield results, there's still hope through IVF using extracted sperm cells or even a donor, if you both are open to it." Chioma clung to the possibilities like a lifeline. "There's still hope," she told herself. "There's still a way to give our son a sibling, to rebuild, to make things work." But Emeka, as always, dismissed the suggestions with a wave of arrogance and wounded pride. He refused the medication. He never returned for follow-up appointments. Instead, he turned to the bottle, drinking like he was trying to drown his shame and into the arms of other women. Multiple girlfriends, some young enough to be his niece, paraded shamelessly around their reality, flaunted like trophies of his broken masculinity. And he didn't hide it. He didn't try to pretend. One night after Chioma confronted him with silent tears in her eyes and a desperate tremble in her voice, Emeka spat his truth like poison. "If you can't bear it, leave. I didn't ask you to stay. In fact, I don't even want another child from a woman like you. You think I don't know? All those men in your so-called business world, you're nothing but a pretender, sleeping around and calling it networking." His words stabbed her deeper than any blow he'd ever dealt, and he had dealt many. "You're free to go, Chioma. Go live your life like you've always wanted. You're already used to other men's compliments anyway." It wasn't just his refusal to try, it was his choice to ruin, to abandon, to humiliate. And Chioma, strong, resilient Chioma, began to crumble. She didn't know what to do, where to go, or who to talk to. The shame, the confusion, the betrayal, it all formed a thick fog that blurred her once bright vision. She became a shadow of herself. Her laughter disappeared. Her light dimmed. Her voice, once firm in business meetings and vibrant in friendships, became quiet, hesitant, broken. Depression wrapped itself around her like a cloak. Anxiety gnawed at her day and night. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She couldn't think. The very business she had built with passion and excellence, the empire she had created from the ashes of her resignation, began to wither. She no longer cared for client meetings, proposals, or projects. Phone calls went unanswered, emails remained unopened. Deals fell apart. She was sinking, not just from the absence of love, but from the absence of hope. And for the first time, Chioma questioned not her marriage, but her existence. How did I get here? How did a woman full of dreams become a ghost in her own life? But deep within her silence, something was still alive. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. A whisper, a flicker. You're not done yet. Despite the weight pressing against her chest each morning, despite the storm of heartbreak and rejection swirling around her, Chioma was not ready to give up. Not yet. She still believed, maybe in a miracle, maybe in possibility. But above all, she believed that if there was one more thread left to hold on to, she had to try. For herself, for her son, for the dream of another child. Since Emeka wasn't taking his medication and showed no sign of commitment to any treatment, Chioma pleaded with him again. Let's try IVF, please. Just give it a chance. Surprisingly, he gave a reluctant nod. Go and make inquiries, he said dismissively. And she did. She went to the IVF center with cautious hope. After explaining their situation, the doctor advised that she run a test almost immediately. It was the standard procedure. Chioma stepped outside the clinic and called Emeka. They advised I do the test today, she told him, and it costs quite a bit. Emeka's voice was dry over the phone. Do you have the money? Yes, she answered. I do. Then go ahead, he said. No warmth, no encouragement, just permission. She paid. She submitted her samples. She completed the forms and waited patiently as the process began. Before leaving, the clinic advised that Emeka should come in the following Saturday for his own round of tests and sperm analysis. They gave her brochures detailing various IVF procedures and options, along with the payment, receipt, and next steps. Chioma returned home, exhausted but hopeful. She placed the neatly arranged documents on the table in front of Emeka, gently sliding the information toward him. These are the IVF plans they offer, she said. And here's the receipt for the test I did. They'd like you to come next Saturday. Emeka didn't touch the papers. He stared at her, then slowly shook his head. I asked you to go and make inquiries, not to prove you have money, he said bitterly. But you couldn't help yourself. You wanted them to see how powerful you are, right? That you can do anything without your husband. That you don't need my permission. Chioma's heart sank. I only paid because they needed to begin the process, she said softly. I thought you agreed. He cut her off. The reason you said you had money was to show me you're independent. You wanted to impress them. A self-sustained woman who doesn't need a man's input. That's why you went ahead without asking if I wanted to pay. You've always wanted to act like the head in this house. He didn't acknowledge her effort. He didn't ask how the test went. He didn't even look at the IVF plans. What hurt the most wasn't just the words, but the intent behind them. He twisted her strength into rebellion, her initiative into disrespect, her hope into insult. And as Chioma sat quietly, watching the man she once loved sink further into ego and bitterness, a deeper realization began to take root. She was no longer fighting for her child. She was now fighting to hold on to herself. Emeka never went for the test, despite all of Chioma's pleading, her gentle reminders, her quiet prayers whispered into the silence of their bedroom. He refused, vehemently, with the kind of finality that stung like betrayal. I'm not going, he said. I already told you, I'm not the problem. If we had one child, we can have another. Stop pushing this nonsense. She tried again. It's just a test, Emeka. Let's just be sure, please. But he never looked back. He never went. And the clinic's policy was clear. Money paid is non-refundable. It was a blow that left Chioma hollow, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. The opportunity lost, the hope ignored. The silence that followed felt like a graveyard of dreams. She buried herself in her business, pouring her brokenness into tasks and schedules, client calls and service deliveries. But with each passing day, the pain crept in, quiet and consistent. She wasn't growing younger, Her body reminded her every morning with aching joints and weary eyes. Where would she start from if she ever decided to leave? Who would take her in? Where would she go? But Emeka gave her no rest. Each morning, like clockwork, his voice would shatter whatever peace she had gathered during the night. "So you're still here," he would say, standing in the doorway like a warden. "You really have no shame. After all I've done to you, you're still in my house." Chioma would pretend not to hear, but the words stabbed anyway. "Oh, I see now," he continued one morning, sneering. "Your rich clients aren't helping you, Abi. All those big men you claim are just business partners. None of them can house you." She said nothing. "Even your brothers," he added with a cold chuckle. "They've abandoned you too. No one wants to deal with your kind. That's why you're still crawling around here like a stray dog. Pathetic." She looked at him, empty, not with anger, not even sadness anymore, just emptiness. Because it wasn't just a home she had lost. It was her voice, her peace, her freedom to hope. But somewhere deep within, beneath the weight of insults and disappointments, a quiet flame still flickered. It hadn't died completely, and maybe, just maybe, she would find the strength to let it burn brighter again. One weary evening, as the day folded into night and Chioma prepared dinner in silence, Emeka walked in with a tone that was unusually calm. Too calm. "I'm getting another place," he said, dropping his keys on the table. Chioma turned slowly, surprised. "Another place?" "Yes," he replied casually. "But you're not a part of it. I'm moving out, and I'll be taking my son with me. You can go find a place of your own." Chioma froze. The words cut through her like a blade. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. I'm taking my son. You can leave and do whatever it is you've always wanted to do." She looked at him, stunned. "You want to take him away from me? After everything? You who's never been part of his life. You don't even know what class he's in. You've never done a school drop-off or pick-up, never sat through a PTA meeting or helped with homework. What makes you think he would want to go with you?" Still unaware of the manipulation happening behind her back, Chioma sat in confusion, her heart pounding. She began to question herself. Was something happening she didn't know? Had she missed signs? The weight of it all pressed heavily on her chest. And yet, beneath the confusion and shock, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't just another argument. This was war. And the battleground was her son. With the firmness in Emeka's voice and the unsettling calmness with which he spoke, Chioma grew more confused. Her heart raced as she tried to make sense of what had just been said. He was serious. He was planning to leave and take her son with him. The only person she could think to call was her niece, Izioma, who once lived with them and had seen some of the chaos unfold firsthand. "Izioma," Chioma said, barely holding back tears. "Emeka just told me he's moving out, and he says he's taking my son with him." There was silence on the line before Izioma responded gently. "Auntie Chioma, have you talked to the boy about this?" "No," Chioma said firmly. "Why would I? That boy can never agree to live with his father. Never. He knows who's been there for him. He knows who's taken care of him. That man has never even bathed him once, never taken him to school or brought him back. Never read him a bedtime story or helped with homework. How can he possibly choose him?" Izioma sighed. "Auntie, that's exactly why you need to talk to him. Don't assume. You don't know what's been said to him. You don't know what he's been hearing. You need to be sure. Because the way Uncle Emeka is talking, he sounds too confident. That's not ordinary." Chioma paused, her breath caught in her chest. Deep down, she feared what Izioma was implying, but she wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. "I don't want to drag the boy into all of this," she said softly. "He's still a child. He doesn't need to carry this burden. Whatever Emeka and I are going through, he shouldn't have to choose." Izioma's voice became firmer, but still. "I understand, Auntie. But the truth is, he's already involved. You may be trying to shield him, but Uncle Emeka clearly isn't. Please, just talk to him. Don't wait until it's too late." Chioma ended the call, her heart heavy. She walked to her son's room and stood by the door, listening to him hum as he played with his toys, innocent and unaware of the storm gathering around him. She wanted to keep him safe, but she was beginning to realize there were battles she couldn't fight with silence. Chioma sat on the edge of the couch, her palms sweating as her heart pounded beneath her ribs. She had avoided this moment for as long as she could, but there was no running anymore. She needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Come here, my son," she said softly. The boy came quietly and sat, his face calm but unreadable. "I want to talk to you," she began gently. "Soon, your dad and I, we may no longer live together. We may be moving out of this house, and you," her voice caught, "you'll have to choose who you want to stay with." The boy looked down at his fingers, fiddling with them in silence. "Whomever you choose, I'll respect your decision," Chioma added, trying to sound braver than she felt. "But I would like you to tell me why you chose the person." "So," she paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Between me and your father, who would you like to live with?" Without lifting his head, the boy answered firmly, "My father." It felt like a slap to her chest. She blinked, stunned. Still, she kept her voice steady. "Your father? Why?" The boy hesitated. "Don't be afraid, my son," she encouraged him gently. "You can say anything. I promise I won't be angry with you. I just want to understand." He looked up briefly, then dropped his gaze again. "Daddy said, you're planning to leave us." At that moment, Chioma felt something shift deep within her. A chill passed through her spine. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone and, without a word, hit the record button. She needed to hear this. She needed proof, not for revenge, but for sanity. "Go on," she said quietly. "He said, you have many boyfriends," the boy continued in a low voice, "and that you want to travel around with them. That's why you won't have time for me. He said you are the reasons we fall sick, even him too, that it's the bad things you're doing that makes us sick." Chioma gasped, but she didn't interrupt. "He also said I should never tell you what he tells me. If I do, he won't trust me anymore. He said he won't tell me things again if I talk." Chioma broke. Tears poured freely down her cheeks. Her body shook as she covered her face with her hands, letting out a deep, aching cry from a place of betrayal she didn't know existed. The wail that followed was not just of heartbreak, but of mourning. Mourning the loss of innocence, the cruelty of manipulation, and the shattering of everything she had tried to hold together. Her son looked frightened. He had never seen her cry like that before. Not this way, but Chioma couldn't stop. She had held on for too long, hoping, praying, enduring, and now it was clear. She wasn't just losing her marriage, she was losing her child, to a lie, to a man who had made her the enemy in her own home. And in that moment, Chioma knew something had to change, or she would not survive this. With her son's heartbreaking confession still echoing in her soul, Chioma sat in silence, numb but awakened. The weight of 12 long years pressed down on her chest. 12 years of enduring, of hoping, of praying that something, anything, would change. But now, the veil had been torn, the mystery unraveled. The hope that once sustained her had withered under the crushing truth. She had been living with an enemy, not just a cold husband, not just a broken man, but someone who hated her with calculated cruelty. The center was no longer holding. Everything was broken, shattered beyond repair. She stared at the walls of the house she once called home, her heart emptied of sentiment. It was time to breathe again, time to find herself. With a resolve that came from deep within, Chioma began her search for a new place. It didn't need to be grand. She wasn't searching for comfort. She was searching for freedom, air untouched by scorn, peace untainted by fear. Within a month, she found it. A small, modest apartment tucked away from the chaos. It didn't sparkle with luxury, but it glowed with hope. It was hers, a fresh start, a safe haven. Then, she took the boldest step of all. She forwarded the recorded conversation to Emeka, her son's voice, innocent but soaked in manipulation. She added only one message: "Dare to stop me from taking my son and we'll meet in court. I would love to see the judge that will grant custody to a man who poisons his child's mind against his mother." There was silence on Emeka's end, and then came the day. The day Chioma finally walked out, head held high, back straight, with her son by her side. Emeka stood at the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing. His usual bluster was gone. The proof in her hands had silenced the storm. He didn't stop her. He couldn't. And as Chioma crossed the threshold, a sudden wave of clarity swept over her. This was divine. What she had once seen as rejection, as betrayal, as the tearing apart of her home, was God's own hand pulling her from the wreckage. Asking her to leave had been Emeka's final attempt to break her, but it turned out to be God's plan to deliver her, a rescue mission from a prison she didn't even realize she had built around herself. Chioma looked up at the open sky. For the first time in years, she could breathe, and with each breath, she whispered to her soul, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." Thank you for watching till the end. Please encourage me by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video to your families and friends. Watch out for other amazing, life-touching stories on this channel.